Good evening, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us today about this talk regarding paying for U.S. university education. My name is Wendy Beato, and I am the International University Advisor at Varsity Abroad. And I am being joined today by an expert when it comes to financial aid and everything around finances and scholarships in the U.S. And I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Leanne Crane. Thank you for joining us. I have been in the college consulting world for about 12 years and strictly finances for about 4 or 5. So if at any time you have questions, feel free, write down my email, reach out. I'd love to educate parents and students on college finances. So we hope you learn a lot and let us know if you have any questions.
Awesome. All right, let's just begin. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to do a quick recap about the journey of the entire application process to the US. So it begins with you filling out your application. And at that time, usually what happens is that you will submit your application together with your financial aid forms, if it is a need-based application. And then the university will take your information and review it, and then they will give you an acceptance. At that point, you'll probably also receive your financial aid package, telling you whether you have been awarded any scholarships or grants. And then once you select the university that you want to attend, that university then will require you to submit some more information for them to give you the paperwork that you're going to need to go and get your student visa. And then once a student visa has been processed, then you will set up information about how to pay for your semesters and so on. So that's just a very crude way of telling you like where it starts and kind of where it ends. I'm also going to talk about, well, the general application and what happens. So when you are applying to the US, you will use an online application. Some of the ones that are more popular will be the Common App or the Coalition, where many universities will use that application for you to submit your details, and then you'll submit them to them directly. However, some universities have their own applications. So like MIT, Georgetown, they have their own application that they have in their, website. So you have to fill out that information. Now, what they usually look at when it comes to reviewing your application is going to be at things like GPA, which is a grade point average. And usually for international students, the university will recalculate. This is a question I get a lot where people are saying, what GPA do I put in my, Common App? You usually leave that blank because the university will recalculate it and then convert your courses to the US equivalent. And every university has their own formula. So basically I tell people just let them do it for you, because even if you put something down, they're going to have to redo it. They're also going to look at test scores, so SATs or ACTs, TOEFL, and so on. Do know that in this year, we still have test optional admissions where universities allow you to submit a different kind of test, or they will not consider testing when it comes to your applications. There's also going to be college essays. There's usually a general one that you have to complete, and some universities will have additional essays that you do. Really important are teacher recommendations. This is where 3 of your teachers will give recommendations on your behalf so that the university can get an idea of what they can expect from you in the classroom, as well as within the university itself. And something else that is really important to help you stand out from others is your activities. And this allows universities to know what else besides you bring into the table. So what are you going to be participating in? If you did sports at school, are you likely to come and join us or do, community service and so on? So these factors, the whole process, is what they call the holistic application process. And that is what they're going to use to evaluate your application and give you an offer. The Common App, and actually the application season begins in August. So you can start filling out the application for the intake during August of your grade 12 year. For us here in South Africa, that means that it is going to be in the beginning of prelims for the grade 12s. So again, planning ahead is really important. And you can start submitting applications as early as October all the way to December. There are different deadlines that you have to pay attention to. So again, it's just a matter of making sure that you know what deadlines you have to submit them through. Okay. And I'll leave it over to Leanne to explain what these are.
Yeah, the financial forms. Here in the US, we have our free application for federal student aid. A bit confusing even for US parents, but it is an application. Once you complete it, it spits out a number called an EFC, which we don't really need to get into right now. Just be aware that there is this form if you have your student or yourself has a Social Security number to complete. If not, there's other forms that the colleges will ask for. A CSS profile is a very invasive type financial form. It's for the Ivy Leagues and the top tier colleges. About 300 of them require it. And this would be asking every type of financial question, including your house and your cars and all your savings and investments and things like that. And this is where the colleges would use all that information to generate, again, another number, which determines if the student will receive any institutional aid, any grants from the college and things like that. Mostly, if it's a true international student without the Social Security number, there'll be this international student financial aid application. There is one that is in the CSS profile, so you might need to complete that one, or a lot of colleges have their own specific application and they would send that to you to complete. And once that is sent to them, then again, they can determine if the student is eligible to receive what we call the free money, any of the grants that would be offered from the school. And then if you have that Social Security number, any of the money from the government.
Yeah, and just to clarify, guys, for those of you who are American, that means that you will probably have a Social Security number. That means that you will have to fill out the FAFSA. That's what we call it for short. And it allows you to get aid from the government, So again, so if you are a US citizen or resident that has a Social Security number, that's one that you will have to do. So international students do not do FAFSA because that's not for you. So just be aware of that, that is specifically for students who are US citizens or residents, okay? And let me go to the next one. And can you, Leanne, tell us about proof of funding?
Yep, so along with that, once you've accepted, the college obviously would want proof of funding before they can give you the documentation to get that student visa. So that documentation usually consists of things such as your tax documents, pay stubs, bank statements, affidavits, or an official letter, anything like that that's just going to prove that you have the funding for your student to attend the college. Most of them are one. I have seen some colleges that require 2 years of funding in those documentations. But again, each college has its own policy. So I wish there was a clear answer. I could tell you what you'd need and how much, but that just isn't the way it works. Every college kind of has their own policy on international aid, free money, scholarships, and documentation that they need. So just be aware that at some point you will need some of this information.
Okay. So I'm going to explain some of the financial aid that is available to international students. And it basically breaks into two parts. One is merit aid scholarships. So you are being rewarded for being good at something. And that is what they call grants, which is what we also call need-based aid. And this is based on what kind of financial situation you as a family are in. And then with that information, they will figure out, well, how much money can you afford out of pocket to help with your with your tuition. And then whatever gap there is, that gap is what they use to determine what kind of scholarships they're going to give you. But they will need to, before that, know, well, how much can you pay, out of pocket. Some terminology that I wanted to talk about is what is called need blind and need aware. Need blind basically means that the university will not look at your financial situation before offering you aid admissions. So they will not take that into account when they are looking to whether they should give you a spot or not at the university. And need aware means that part of the admissions process is that they'll have to look at your finances to make sure that you are able to pay for your education. And again, that does mean that they will look at, well, how much scholarship can they offer you and how much can you afford? And if the gap is too big, it might determine, it might affect their decision to whether admit you or not. Some information that I have is that at the moment, there are 6 universities in the US that are need blind for international students. That is Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Amherst, MIT, and Dartmouth. Actually, early this year, they actually said that they will become need blind. So that's a new one to the list. But only these 5 universities will not look at finances to give you an admissions for international students. So in the US, for those who are US citizens, there's quite a lot, like a bigger number of universities that are need blind. But for true international students, only 6 universities will give you acceptances without looking at your finances first. Okay. So I'm going to explain now what the difference, like how do you get a merit scholarship and how is it awarded? So Um, for merit scholarships, there are different criteria that they can give you, some like a reward for. So it could be whether you're really good academically. So I'll say like, here's smart, you're very smart, here's money. It could be done for like leadership roles that you do at school, whether also if you do well in the SATs or the ACTs. I actually do know schools that like say if this student, has this kind of, GPA aggregate in these SATs, they get this much, and the better you do on SATs and ACTs, you know, the better chances are for you to get a scholarship. So even though SATs might not be required for admissions, they certainly are still being used for scholarship. So that is one reason why you should probably still, take the SATs, even though there's test optional admissions, because that does translate into a scholarship. There are also scholarships that are given because of extramural activities. I can think about the University of California and how they have a list of, that you can tick off, like, have you participated in this and that? So your extramurals can get you scholarship of, community service stuff or passion projects that you are involved in. And the way that it is awarded, normally, especially when it comes to academic, it is automatically. So you don't need to apply. They will consider you at the time that you get, that you apply, send the application. However, there are other scholarships that you will need to send an application. And I can think specifically about Boston University, where they'll have scholarships where you have to write an essay. And they also have what is called an early deadline, what I call the priority deadline. And usually that tends to be in early December. So like if you want to be considered for merit aid, some schools have rules that you need to apply early. If you, like Boston University, again, being an example, if you want to be considered for merit aid of any type, you need to apply before the 1st of December. Anyone that applies thereafter will not be considered for merit aid. So it's things that you need to know. Some websites here that I recommend that you guys visit that is specifically for international students. The first one being internationalstudent.com, go into the scholarship and they'll have information. One that I often also share with my students is the IFA.org. And I actually just found this website the other day on LinkedIn, Afridemics.com. It's actually a new organization in Africa, specifically sharing information about scholarships for African students in the continent. So please check those out. And that is specifically for like merit aid type of scholarships that you can go and find to help you, supplement your fees for university. All right. Moving on to what is called need-based financial aid or grants. And this is the one where they look at your financial situation to determine, well, how much money can you afford? And that's what they call the EFC amount, which is the expected family contribution. And they'll look at your income, they look at your assets, expenses. And like Leanne said, the CSS profile is quite extensive. So you will look at things like, well, how old are your parents? How many kids are in university? Do you own your home? Do you own cars? Do you have investments? And, so they really want to get an idea of where you are financially, what are your responsibilities? And from that, they will determine, well, based on this information, we feel that they can afford to pay this much. Doesn't mean that you agree with them, but that is their formula. And every school has their own formula. So I do advise that you go and do the EFC calculators at the university's website. They all have one by law. They have to have one. So go ahead and do it. And again, the ISFAA is another one. It's basically the free version of the CSS profile, in my opinion, because you do have to pay to submit the CSS profile to schools. All right. And with that, we move into you being accepted. Yay! So this is what happens when you get accepted. So congratulations, you're going to get lots of different offers from universities because you're going to do really well. And we feel that you're going to do fantastic. And then this is when you start getting your financial aid packages. And different universities are going to send you different things. And one of the things that is really important at this point is to make sure that you understand what is actually being offered. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it to the expert because she's going to break it down for you. Here you go.
So once you get your financial aid package, usually I think most colleges send them in the portal now. So your student will be.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, I went to the next. Yeah. I have a very sensitive. There you go. Go ahead.
Yep. And so the financial aid, as said by Wendy, will be broken down into grants and scholarships, which are discounts to the price. So just cost will be the tuition, room, board, and fees. So this is usually the amount you see on a website when you Google it and it says, how much does this cost? That's what that will include. A lot of schools will also include those indirect fees, which you can see to the right. I have in the spreadsheet, transportation, books, personal expenses, those kinds of things. A lot of them will include it in the cost, but usually when we're trying to figure out how to pay for college, those aren't necessarily included, and so they're usually paid a different way, but you do need to factor them into your funding because obviously, especially if you're coming to the US, that transportation will be a big one. The books and personal expenses can usually are pretty close to what the school estimates. So down here in the bottom is a very easy tuition financial aid package that I found. Most of them are a little more complicated than this, but it does break it out: tuition fees, your housing and meals, your book, supplies, transportation, all those things. And then the student received a $10,000 grant, and then there's the cost. So again, you'll take those fees, room, board, all those, that's the cost. Subtract what we call the free money, scholarships. Any outside scholarships you would get would also come off of here. And that would be your out of pocket or the funding that you would need to prove to come to the US. Next.
You want to go to the next one? I was going to say, and I was going to also mention that when you get gift aid, it does apply to tuition, room, and board. Can you confirm that, Leanne, with me? That is not just for tuition?
There are some schools that when they give you, we've seen a lot lately, room grants. So they will take, I know a couple schools, they give out $2,000 room grants. And so those would be free money, $2,000 that's coming off the cost. But then usually around junior year of most colleges, students move off campus. And so you would lose that $2,000 room grant. And then the scholarships, again, usually when I go through a tuition bill with a family, we go to the scholarships, I like to remind people that there is a GPA attached to those scholarships. So the student really needs to be aware, and it's not, it's not to scare them. You're not usually awarded a scholarship with a GPA if it's not within what you're capable of. But you do just need to be aware, if it's a 3.0 or a 3.5, which is really high. But, I like to remind students, if it's a 3.0 in your first semester, you're getting a 2.5, that second semester is really hard. Now you got to get a 3.5 to have that average out. So, and that's a lot of money to put on the line. So it rarely happens. We get kids once in a while where, we write appeals and try and get back in the good graces of the college. But just to be aware that scholarships are, there's that GPA attached. And then grants, conversely, is, those are based on your financial picture. So every year, if your financial picture changes, whether it be up or down, that grant money can also change. So that's something you need to be aware of.
Just to clarify to you guys in South Africa, so the GPA is the grade per average, and that translates to our school aggregate. So it's basically the aggregate in the US is out of 4 points instead of out of 100 like we do here. So at 3.0 will be like, I'm going to say 75% aggregate.
Plus an A.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell them like our local one, it will be like in your mid 70s and up, and then 3.5 will be 80s and above, which in South Africa is actually really hard. It's very different to the US system. It's actually a really hard thing to attain. Anyone getting 90s is like you are, super smart. But it's really, really difficult to get 80s.
2.5 would be average, a 75% kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool. Yep. Yeah. So just so you know that they will, if you get a merit aid, they will say you can have this. It's basically the terms and condition. You will give you this, grant as long as you maintain this aggregate, or grades, and you take X amount of credits and so on.
Right.
And so so just be aware that there are terms and conditions when it comes to your financial aid. Sorry, I always struggle with my computer, and here we go.
So I just wanted to point out some policies just to, again, how all colleges are different, and it's very important that you look on their website so that you understand the policies of them. So Penn State, the flagship school in the state of Pennsylvania, is no financial aid for international students. So that is just their policy. So if you were to apply to that school, you would know kind of upfront that the cost that they publish on their website would be the price that you would need to pay to attend that school if you were accepted. Cornell is a Ivy League. They are need aware, and you would be evaluated, obviously, as it says, and they do award students aid based on your FAFSA, CSS profile, or the ISFAA. They do not do any merit aid, as most IVs do not. University of Miami, which is the one in Ohio, not to be confused with Miami University. And they award both merit and need-based aid. So anyone applying there would definitely get, some money if you deserved it need-based, and then some merit aid based on your criteria. So it's nice when you can find colleges that have both those, better option to make it affordable. UC Berkeley, international students are ineligible for federal, state, and need-based university financial aid. So again, just to be aware that if you're applying to these schools, if budget is a concern, to find out what the policies of the colleges are, which is where obviously Wendy and I come into play to help you with that.
Yep.
And then again, just another one for Duke. So just kind of pointing out that just to be aware is in your college search, check out what the policies are if that financial piece is important in your decisions.
And so this is just to tell you why, they're not trying to be mean like UC Berkeley and Penn State. These are usually public schools, and they are funded by the taxes for the residents of that state. So it's it's basically funded by the people that live there. So it's, they need to give priority to those students and citizens, because their parents are the one funding for the university. So it makes it very difficult for the universities to offer international students aid, when it comes to public schools. And something that for Duke, and actually for Duke and any other school that gives you, a lot of the Ivies, if you don't, a lot of people do this strategy where they won't apply for aid at the beginning because they feel like, oh, if I don't apply for aid, I'll get in. And because, I'm going to be a full paying international student, and that's a lot of money. And then, what happens is that if, let's say, your situation changes, second year, third year, you are not able to apply for aid thereafter. So even if you think you're not going to, get aid and so on, you must apply with you at the beginning when you are getting into the university. Otherwise, you will not be able to apply later on. There might be exemptions, I don't know, but it's, Duke makes it part of their policy, and it tells them, no, if you don't apply at the beginning, you will not be able to apply for financial aid thereafter.
Yes, okay. If they don't have that baseline the first year, they're not going to entertain that. And you never know what happens, future years. COVID has taught us that. We definitely don't know what happens. So definitely probably not a bad idea to submit that. And, as Wendy has said, those big state schools that we've heard of, Penn State, UConn, Ohio State, those are, they don't have the big endowments that the private schools do. And they obviously charge out-of-state students extra money. So that's why they're, as Wendy said, they're not being mean. There just aren't the funds to assist right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So here goes some
just
scary
some
numbers.
Examples, colleges I hope you have heard of. Case Western, the Ivy of the Midwest, a great STEM school, really, really good school. Loyola Chicago, all the Loyolas are good schools. Cornell, we talked about. SUNY Binghamton is a state university of New York, the highest ranked New York school. I always like to point that out because a lot of people have not heard of the state system in New York, but it is a really good education system. Google and Intel recruit out of Binghamton, those kinds of things. And then Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. So these are their 4-year costs. And then
so I just wanted to clarify that this is the 4 years, not what you will pay per year. This is like the entire education and what it will cost you. And then in the next slide.
Yep, this is broken down by year, but I just wanted to show you again the importance of finding out, if that money is of concern to you, how the schools have different policies based on money. So, there's Case Western, 23% of international students received an average of $30,000. So that definitely helps with that price. Loyola Chicago, 80% of their international students, so a little less money, but at least more of the international students are getting some assistance. Cornell, 14% of their international students. So again, a high amount, but a low percentage of the international students.
Yeah.
SUNY Binghamton, again, just showing the state school. So they do give a
Yep.
little bit to international students. And then Carnegie Mellon offers, no need or no merit.
No.
So that would be the amount you're paying per year.
Okay.
And then the college search is kind of, I even tell US families, again, don't only apply to colleges you've heard of, and I'm sure it's probably even more so in your area. Here in the US, we're driven by sports. So the top college football teams, basketball teams, are the ones that kids want to go to. But there's over 3,000 colleges here, and, most of them will give a great education. So don't discount them just because you haven't heard of them, kind of thing. Know what your budget is so you can create a list and find those colleges, especially the ones that give both aid. Not only do you want it to fit academically, but financially too, obviously. And then another thought too, if you know your students going on for a grad degree, if they're in those PA, PT, pre-med, even accounting, engineering, any of those, if you definitely know they're going on, look at those schools that have a lot more aid or a little less expensive. We always say, those doctors aren't putting their undergrad diplomas on their wall there. It's, where did they go to med school, kind of thing. So just keep that in mind. And then obviously, if you need help, that's where Wendy and I come in.
Yeah. And I do have to go back to number one. One of the things that I do is that, especially internationally, they only know Harvard, Yale, Princeton, the big names. And there are so many other universities out there. And part of my job is to actually show you which are those schools. And sometimes there are schools that will give you a lot more aid than the ones that you know of. I mean, if you look at the previous example with Cornell, it's $50,000 a year, but only 14% of them get it. So you might not get that amount. So again, you need to know these things. And one of the things I tell my families immediately when we start working is, what is your budget? Because based on that budget, I will recommend universities. My biggest example is, for example, NYU. I know that NYU, super popular, great school, but they will give you around $23,000 a year tops as an international. That means that out of pocket, you're going to be paying between $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So if I know that your budget is $20,000 a year, I'm not going to recommend NYU. You shouldn't waste your time applying to NYU because it's not a good fit financially. So again, knowing the financial side and where, if what fits your budget is super important, when you're doing your application search. Okay. So I'm going to go, we're both going to go through some of the college questions that we usually get. One of them being, do all universities offer international students aid? The answer is no, not all of them do, but a lot of them do. And part of doing the college search, the research first is to find those schools that do need, offer aid if you need it. Not every international student needs financial aid, and that's fantastic if you don't. But if you do need aid, you need to get someone to help you or do your research to make sure that the university, offers aid. I'm going to let you talk about this one, Leanne.
Sure. Sports scholarship. Yep, definitely. There are sports scholarships. That full ride myth is kind of just that. It's really a myth. It's rare that you're going to get an athlete. They have a pool of money, and it's usually divided up over the team. Every once in a while, you will hear of a coach spending all of the money on one athlete, but that is rare. Usually the D2 schools will give more sports scholarships, so that's something to look at. Here in the US, we have D1, which is all the names you've heard of, D2 and D3. D3 does not give scholarships to athletes. D2 is usually where you're going to find the most money. And it's where you're really going to play. So if you love your sport and you want to play, you're more apt to definitely play on a D2 team and get some money for it. Though, D1's not, you're just going to have to do a little more work because you're going to have to send videos and do a little bit more recruiting for yourself because it's hard, obviously, internationally. But it's possible.
I'm going to repeat something that you just said, Leanne, because a lot of people come to me and it's like, can I get a sports scholarship? I play rugby and so on. Not rugby, number one, is not a big sport in the US. So there's not going to be a lot of money there. And something else is that you're going to get some money as a sports scholarship, but there is going to be a budget that you're going to have to pay, as part of it. Yeah. So I always tell my families, because they say, oh, do you help with sports scholarship? And I'm going to tell everybody, I don't do a sports scholarship because of the amount of work it requires with the videos and talking to coaches and so on. I do have a lot of athletes because a lot of my students do get recruited and they still have to do the SATs and the essays and so on.
Right.
But just be aware that getting a sports scholarship requires a lot of work. You should start in grade 11, talking to coaches, because it's about building relationships. Do note that you're going to have to showcase yourself and start like communicating with the school and seeing what interests they have. You know, it's not that if you get a sports scholarship, it's going to cover all your costs. It will not.
No.
And I know this because I have athletes that have gotten accepted to top Ivy Leagues. And remember that the Ivy Leagues do not give merit aid. They do not give sports scholarship. Everything in the Ivy League is need-based. But yes, coaches can push to get you accepted, but it doesn't mean that you get a scholarship based on that sport. You do not.
Right.
So just be aware that sports scholarships can help, but it's not going to cover everything. That's, you know, it's not, you know, that kind of, I think that gives us to the next question, which is, can I get a full scholarship? In this economy, they are very rare. You know, I'm not saying that they're not impossible. I can imagine that there are some very deserving kids somewhere that, you know, it's in a difficult situation and probably will get one, but it's not something that happens often. So just be aware that you need to have a budget. You're not going to get all the scholarship money you need to pay for your education. It's not, you know, it's just not common anymore in this economy. I will probably let you answer this one, Leanne.
Yeah, so probably just the documents we had discussed before. Once you complete the CSS profile, it will be reviewed, and then the college will get back to you with what specific documents. It's usually tax forms. You'll get email, and it's called iDoc, is usually the one related to the CSS profile where you'll upload them into there. Some colleges ask you to mail these things. I'm not sure why in this day and age, but I had to mail my tax returns to Tulane, so that's what we did. But yeah, usually the college will get back to you and tell you specifically what they need and how to get it to them. But most often it's a tax return.
And the EFC calculator is basically that document that allows you to practice putting all the information about your finances and, you know, how many children the parents have, siblings, and so on. And it will give you at the end, when you finish it, it will give you an amount that it says that you can afford. My families, I make them do a practice calculator using my software. So they're going to be doing that pretty soon with me. And it just allows us to check in to make sure that they're not making any mistakes, which is where also Leanne comes in. You know, she'll make sure that you're doing things correctly. But that is basically just a tool for you to use to get an idea of what universities think you can afford. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Is that.
Yeah. So merit aid scholarship, like we said, most of the time they're automatic because the university will just consider you, but there are those like presidential scholarships that they might ask you to do an essay, or they have like a deadline that you have to apply for. So it depends on what what you're doing. But for academic scholarships, for like, you know, if your SATs are well and you have good academics, it usually gets considered automatically during your application. Okay. That's for you, Leanne. Can my family take a loan?
Oh, so this, I didn't see that pop up. Yeah, so if you need, there's that gap with what the college says you should pay and the free money. A lot of parents take the loan. So if you do have that Social Security number, you can take a loan out in the US. If you have that Social Security number, you can also take a loan from the federal government or co-sign for a private loan. And I have a lot of relationships with lenders in that area, and they still there's no, without that Social Security number, they just don't offer it to international students or families. So it would be something you'd have to get. I know there are very few, but there are some based, you know, in your country that you could get a loan for to pay. I think I have one that I know of. I have one lender that's working on it, trying to figure out a way to be able to give international students that money. But right now there aren't any that are based in the US that would give you that money.
Yeah. And should I fill out the FAFSA CSS profile if I have money to pay? So again, if you feel like you don't need any money, you can afford to pay, but should you fill it out? My answer will be yes, because things might change. You might have a second child going to university in a few years' time, and you never know. You know your finances are going to change. So I mean, it depends on you. I do have families that kind of don't want to go through the stress of it, but it's like if you go through it, you'll get money. So,
There's
what is
not
your
a
take on that?
downside, and we find a lot of families that think they won't qualify do end up getting something. Especially at the higher price school, the higher your EFC needs to be, you'll still get money. So there are a few downsides, but not usually many that that would make it worth not filling out.
Okay. And where do I get outside scholarships? So like I said, I did share those 3 websites, the IEFA.org, and then academics, and then internationalstudents.com. Definitely go there. And then you can actually enter in those websites. You can even enter things like your country and what you're studying. You'll be able to get information about any additional scholarships. Leanne, can you talk about how those outside scholarships factor into the financial aid? Because I've heard, and I'm not an expert, I'm actually asking you, is usually if you get outside money, it gets used as part of your EFC?
It depends on the school. So it's called displacement of scholarships. So in the US, it's usually that middle income range, unfortunately. If you have no money and you get a outside scholarship, you're receiving financial aid, so they'll just subtract those scholarships from the cost, and the scholarship is a benefit for you. And those really high earners, so if you're getting no money from a school and you get an outside scholarship, it will subtract it from the cost. If you're receiving a little bit of that financial aid, now not the merit scholarships, but just the grants, sometimes an outside scholarship, the school says, oh, you have more money to pay for school, so you don't need as much of our aid, and they'll take their aid away in place of that outside scholarship. So it's a very bad practice. It's very upsetting to everyone because the student is working to get this money and then they're not being rewarded for it. So there are a few colleges that do that. I guess after you've picked a school, you can find out, some of them place it right on their website. They will tell you if that happens. It is one of their policies. And then usually, we tell kids to look for the scholarships after all their applications are in and they're all done with that. So by then you should have a good idea of what colleges, you've applied to, and if this particular thing applies to your colleges. You can also look, there's a lot of scholarships, College Board. If you just Google College Board, Pinterest has them broken out by month. Scholly is an app, SCHOLLY. I think it's $3 a month, but it tells you exactly what scholarships apply to you. There's definitely a lot of places you can look, to help with the cost.
Yeah. And just so you know, guys, scholarship, like outside scholarships have a later deadline than your application. So usually your application deadline in the US is either November 1st if you're doing early decision, early action, or the 1st of January if you're doing regular. Most scholarships that are like outside scholarships is usually like February, March, if I'm not mistaken. It's usually, so for us in South Africa, you're done with school. So you can really sit down and, do those if you wanted to. Okay, cool. And with that, guys, we have come to the end of all the things we needed to share. What I would like to do right now is go into the chat and see if you have any questions. And while you're thinking about it, I just want to go over like what kind of services I help students who are looking to apply to the US. So my part of the job will be to help you find the right universities based on where you want to study, your academics, your, what, like your budget. That's really, really important. And also the location, because you do have to say, I want to go to the east or the west and so on. I do help you with filling out your application, helping you with your college essays. And I also help your teachers with their recommendation letters. I do give you general information about financial aid. I don't really get into the actual, filling out the PSS profile because that has sensitive information from your family's budget, which is private. But I'm here to answer and general questions. Leanne will be the one to actually do something like more specific if you have a complex financial situation. And I help with students, monitoring their progress, making sure that they don't miss any deadlines and so on. Leanne, you want to kind of let them know what you can help them with?
Sure. Yep. So after you've done your EFC with Wendy, if you need help completing your FAFSA or the CSS profile, I review those, make sure everything looks okay. Those forms people tend to think they're black and white. They are a little gray. So we like to just make sure you're filling them out completely, and everybody understands, what those numbers mean and how to put those in. So that's really important, because that's going to, be the basis for your free money. Liaison, if you need, with the college financial office. So I'm always talking to them about international students and their policies. I just finished with 2 students at SCAD. I got 1 at Penn State. So, there's always little things that come up. I just had one mom ask me to help her find a bank in Georgia. So that's what I did. Just little things. One of the things that I like to do, if you're concerned about the money, is I do the spreadsheets for the 4-year costs. So I break it down so you know exactly over the 4 years where the money is, what you're going to need to come up with each year, and definitely can plan for those, how you're going to fund those. And working with Wendy, if you needed some college cost estimates prior, we both can help you. She finds the colleges, and we can tell you how much it'll cost for your situation once you have that EFC. And, some of those, the grades and the test scores, we can figure out pretty accurately how much you might be paying for that college, if you need to know that ahead of time.
Oh, awesome. And you can see our websites here on the page. So you can either go to either of our websites, and, you can send us an email. There are, for Leanne, she's in the United States. So you can, probably the best way would be to send her a WhatsApp or an email. And again, for me in South Africa, you can also use my WhatsApp number or send me an email, and then you can get in touch if you have any questions about what we discussed. And I do see that there is a question. Yay! I see.
Payment plans. Yes. So most colleges have payment plans. They run per semester, and it is the full tuition for the semester. So you can't do a payment plan, just to use rough numbers, and pay $1,000 a month and then take a loan for the rest, or credit card for the rest, that kind of thing. If you're doing a payment plan, it is, if the semester is 25,000, then it would be divided by 5 or 6 equal payments set up through the college. Some have a fee, some do not. The thing you need to know about the payment plans, though, is a lot of them start in July or August. So once you are accepted, the bills for freshmen don't actually come out until July. So I have seen colleges that actually start payment plans in June before the bill is out, which I don't understand, but I think it's giving you that longer time to pay, those 6 months to pay. But the websites, under the colleges will tell you if there is a payment plan available. If you're interested, I would just make sure you look early, because they start early.
Yeah, and just know that you don't pay for the whole year. You pay the US.
You pay per semester. Yeah,
it's 2 semesters. So like a school year in the US is 2 semesters. So it's like August to December, and
December
then
you pay.
And then January to.
Yep.
So you don't pay for the full year. You pay for that. For your visa, however, when you go for your visa application, you do need to show funding that you can, pay for at least a year, you said, or something. So just be aware of that for your visa, when you go to the consulate, you will need to have proof of funding, whatever the amount is after you get any scholarship. But you don't have to put all that money all at once at the university. You can pay them slow, a lot slower.
Right.
There's another question that's probably for you as well, Leanne.
Right. So it would be 2 payment plans, just so you'd have a payment plan for the first semester, and then you'd start another one for the second semester.
Cool. Catherine is asking us, if I work in the country and study, will it be more affordable?
I guess I need a little clarification. It would be more affordable in the way that you have a job, so now you have some money to live on, which would be good. I don't think it has any bearing on the aid that you would receive, unless you're earning a lot of money.
And you're not going to be able, so let me explain. So when you are an international student, you can work 20 hours per week during semester time, like when there's classes, and 40 hours per week when you have like spring break or summer holidays and so on. And that will help you earn money, but it's not going to be money that is going to like take a chunk out of tuition. It's going to help you with like living, coffee, Starbucks, movies, shampoo,
Maybe
but
rent. Things like that.
Rent if you want to not live on campus, but it's not going to be like significant enough to pay your tuition. So just know that. And I do believe that you are limited as an international to working jobs that are inside on campus. You can actually clarify that for me, Leanne. like they can't just go get a job outside in the world. It has to be within the university, correct?
I believe that to be true I believe they have to do the
For
stay within a certain,
internationals.
parameters they put on. Yep.
Yeah. So you can't just go like and get a job at Starbucks, downtown in the city.
Right.
You
Starbucks
have to
on
work.
campus, but
Yes,
not down.
you can.
Yes.
Yes. So, and there's a lot of jobs for students. So yes, you can apply.
Yeah.
I think the best ones are to be like the dorm people, because I think you get like a good
The
discount when it
RA,
comes
yep.
to,
If you wanted
yeah,
to be an
if you wanna-
RA, they do
Yes.
your housing and some food. Yep. So that's always
Yes.
a good way to
it's a good
decrease
benefit to
costs.
save money. Yeah. If you become an RA, which is, it's called a resident admission. What is the RA? I'm not sure, but it's basically like if you're like in charge of your floor in your dorm.
Resident,
you get lots
resident
of perks.
assistant, it's called.
There
Yep.
you go.
They call them
So you get a lot
RAs.
of-
It's kind of the mother of the floor, the father of the floor, that you go to with problems and, keeps the floor in control. And those students, some colleges will let you be a sophomore, usually mostly juniors and seniors.
Mhm.
And then anywhere from, free housing to 50% off. A lot of them include
Yeah.
meal plans.
Yep.
So they're a great way to add,
So look for
students
those
interested
jobs.
in that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I have another question. Will it be possible to work online with the visa? Like in the country? See, that's actually a good question, because there's so many jobs like Upwork and so on that could be wherever. Would the university
And
be
if
able
you're
to
in the
touch on
US with a visa, can you work remotely for your?
that? Mhm.
I don't see
That's
why
a
not,
good
but I
one.
don't know the rules of the visa, so we'd have to look that up.
Yeah, that's a good one though. Well done.
It
But I
is,
can
yeah.
see like, I mean, like if you're doing like admin in South Africa and you're
guess it
getting paid
depends
in
on-
South Africa.
Who's paying you would be, to me, I
Yeah.
would have, whether it's online or not, it's where the payment is coming from,
Yeah.
is what they care about.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's what's going to determine. It's like if you're getting hired by a US company, there's usually a W-9 that has to be, like, how in South Africa we have the RP5. There will be like a W-9 document that you'll have to fill out, and then they'll see that you are not in the country.
Yeah,
So
basically
that
for
might be
the
how
US,
they'll
they just
check
want their
it.
taxes. So that's kind of why they're monitoring you. That's what they want. So it will
So
be
if you have to
dependent on
work
where that-
remotely in South Africa and you're getting paid here, then it should be fine. I mean, I don't see a problem, but that's a good question. We're not sure completely, but we think that you should be okay. Have another question. If I do graduate studies in South Africa and postgrad in the US, will that be a good option? Financially, you mean? There are some scholarships for postgraduate. I do find that in the US specifically, there's a lot more money for undergraduates, which is first year students, than there is for postgraduate. There are some, like if you go to Fulbright, MasterCard Foundation, so there are some, but they're not as extensive as you find them if you apply there as a undergraduate student. So it really depends on you, but is there more financial aid for undergraduates in the USA? I wouldn't say that there is more. I think that there's a lot more money for undergraduate, but I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just my experience. Anything like, what are your thoughts, Leanne?
Well, I guess I would also say it depends on what your major is, because there are a lot of grad programs that will, if you're research-based and things like that, that they will pay you to do your grad work, versus if you're doing like a PA program or an accounting program, you'd have to search out to see if there's grad scholarships. But I guess also I'm not understanding, like, I don't know the cost of college in South Africa compared to US. So
a lot cheaper.
So,
a lot cheaper. Yes.
Okay, so it might, that might make sense. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I think our grad schools aren't as overwhelmed as the undergrad, so that could be a really good option for you financially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. All right. I don't see any more questions. Good, awesome. Well, they were very good questions, guys. That's actually, cool stuff to think about. So guys, thank you so much again for joining us today. If you have any questions that you can think about later, by all means, drop us an email, and then we'll be able to, answer them for you. Hopefully you learned a lot, and, again, get in touch and we'll hope to see you soon. All right.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Leanne.
everyone.
Go
Reach out
enjoy your
anytime.
day. All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone.